Breaking! The Kremlin is already in Moldova. Is this an invasion? The country's president has issued the emergency statement as a coup looms. Shocking facts are emerging. Weapons stockpiles, militants from Serbia, and even a plan to seize Odesa. These revelations have shaken the internet. Stay tuned until the end. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. I'm Maria Farafonova, and here are the latest news. Moldovan President Maia Sandu made a bombshell statement during her address to the nation. She revealed that Russia is spending millions of euros to buy off hundreds of thousands of votes ahead of the upcoming parliamentary elections on September 28.
Today, I declare to you with full seriousness our sovereignty, independence, territorial integrity, and European future are under threat.
Moreover, according to her, people are being paid to spread chaos, violence, and intimidate peaceful citizens. She urged Moldovans not to allow the country to capitulate to foreign interests. Sandu stressed that if Russia establishes control over Moldova, the consequences will be dangerous not only for the country, but for the entire region, as Moldova's territory could become a staging ground for a Russian invasion of Ukraine's Odesa region.
All Moldovans will suffer. Europe will end at Moldova's border. European funds will stop at the Prut River. Freedom of movement may cease. Our land could become a staging ground for an invasion of Ukraine's Odesa region. The Transnistrian region will be destabilized.
From words to action. Less than a week before Moldova's parliamentary elections, hundreds of raids have been carried out amid suspicions that Russia is trying to destabilize the country and influence the vote. The national police reported conducting 250 searches targeting more than 100 individuals, though their political affiliations were not specified.
The searches are related to a criminal case involving the preparation of mass riots and destabilization coordinated from the Russian Federation through criminal elements.
As a result, 74 people were detained on suspicion of having undergone training in Serbia to organize mass riots during their elections. Law enforcement officials claim that Russian intelligence services are behind the operation, and the suspects are linked both to Moldovan political parties and to criminal groups. Authorities stated that the investigation into the preparation of mass unrest began back in July 2025. Since then, they uncovered the activities of a group of individuals who regularly traveled to Serbia for training aimed at destabilizing the country. They were specifically taught how to handle firearms and special equipment. For this, participants were paid around 400 euros. As a result of the raids, weapons, ammunition, tents, camouflage clothing, passports, and the other material evidence were seized. If the suspects are found guilty in court, they face between 4 and 8 years in prison. Meanwhile, Western media are also sounding the alarm. For example, Bloomberg reported that in spring, Russian authorities had developed a plan to interfere in Moldova's elections. Moscow's efforts are aimed at undermining the campaign of the pro-European ruling party. It is noted that the operation is coordinated directly by the Kremlin, and the tactics include bringing Moldovan voters abroad, bringing in mercenaries for destructive protests, and launching the massive disinformation campaign on social media. Reports say the ultimate goal is to remove Maia Sandu from power and derail her government's efforts to pursue EU membership. As part of the disinformation campaign, Russia planned to create content in Romanian and Russian, accusing Sandu and claiming she is allegedly influenced from abroad. The outlet emphasized that if the ruling party loses, the Kremlin plans to organize protests demanding Sandu's resignation. And if she wins, they will stage demonstrations aimed at discrediting and questioning the election results.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
At the same time, Russia is inventing new propaganda myths about Europe's so-called plan to occupy Moldova. Kremlin-linked intelligence claims that NATO troops are supposedly concentrating in Romania near Moldova's borders. They also allege that NATO is preparing to deploy forces in Ukraine's Odesa region to intimidate Transnistria, with the first group of soldiers allegedly already in Odesa. According to Moscow, Brussels will not abandon its supposed occupation plan, even if the post-election situation does not require foreign intervention. But that's not all. Beyond election interference, Russia poses a direct threat to Europe. Moscow has repeatedly violated the airspace of NATO member states in an attempt to undermine the European security system. How is Europe responding to the Kremlin's actions, and how is it preparing for a possible war? All the details ahead.
Europe is actively preparing for war with Russia. Most EU country leaders are convinced that the scale of today's conflict will inevitably extend beyond Ukraine. After all, Putin has no intention of stopping with Kyiv. He wants to take Warsaw, Vilnius, Berlin, and Paris as well.
And then, immediately after that, Paris, Berlin, and upon the desolate ruins of Washington, we shall inscribe our own modest names. That's basically the mood right now.
And such statements from the Kremlin about a possible invasion of Europe are no longer considered empty words in the West. EU countries are actively preparing for a potential and even quite specific invasion.
Moscow sees itself as being at war with the West as a whole, and that also includes NATO. Russia will view any sign of weakness as an invitation to go even further and test NATO's unity and resolve to defend every inch of its territory.
The first to demonstrate their determination to resist the Kremlin occupiers, not just in words, but in action, were the Baltic states. Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia are actively preparing for a possible invasion, bringing military units to combat readiness and reinforcing defensive lines along the border with Russia everywhere.
All NATO countries bordering Russia or Belarus are coming to the conclusion that, in order to deter a possible offensive, they need measures that until recently were considered unacceptable.
Along the entire length of the border with the Russian Federation, anti-tank hedgehogs, ditches, rows of barbed wire, and so-called dragon's teeth are appearing. It may seem almost ridiculous, but this is the only way to stand up to Putin's army.
More unusual methods of defense are also emerging. In Lithuania, a swamp on the border with Belarus was once drained, and now they say the swamp needs to be refilled so that Russian tanks can't get through. And overall, they're right.
Meanwhile, France is preparing not to defend itself, but to receive the wounded. A lot of wounded. Official Paris is urgently inspecting hospitals to see if they can accommodate military personnel. The French authorities have calculated that a Kremlin attack on the North Atlantic Alliance will happen in just 6 months.
The French authorities have instructed medical institutions across the country to be ready for large-scale hostilities in March 2026. This, and with such precision, is reported by the French newspaper Le Figaro. According to journalists, Paris is predicting a scenario in which the country must become a rear base capable of receiving a large number of wounded soldiers from France. And even from other European countries, preparations are underway to potentially receive up to 50,000 military personnel alone over the course of 6 months. That is from 100 to 250 people per day.
At the same time, the French authorities are actively preparing their air force for a possible invasion. Like most European countries, they are recruiting and urgently training more and more volunteers.
French society is very strong and, so to speak, takes a responsible approach to the threats of the future. Igor Negoda. In terms of statistics on young people, for example, many questions are conducted based on different estimates, but the overwhelming majority, not the overwhelming majority, but half, even more than half of young people are already signing up, are ready to undergo military service, even signing up as volunteers for this military service.
But in Germany, there are no queues of people wanting to join the Bundeswehr. Local authorities admit that they are already experiencing a shortage of personnel.
We need about 50 to 60,000 more soldiers than we currently have in the regular armed forces. Naturally, the question arises, will that be enough? I can only repeat, a mandatory draft into the army is not necessary for us right now, as long as we don't have the capabilities. We're talking about barracks and the training of soldiers.
Against this backdrop, anxiety is growing among the population in Europe. While Estonians are anxiously awaiting new provocations in the air from Russian MiGs, Poles, whose country has already been repeatedly entered by Putin's drones and Shaheds, are hastily fleeing the country. More and more of them are looking for housing abroad. According to Western agencies, residents of Gdansk, Warsaw, and Krakow are actively considering moving their real estate, in particular to Portugal and Spain. Recently, the number of housing applications from Poles has at least tripled over the past month.
Only 30% of those surveyed said they would like to leave Poland in the event of an attack. 70% are ready to stay. But what the real number will be, of course, we'll only see if such an invasion begins or shelling starts. The fact that Poles have long been buying apartments in Spain farther away from a possible attack on their country is already well known.
Meanwhile, the Polish authorities are actively investing money in their own bomb shelters. For many Polish cities, modernizing and equipping them is almost a top priority.
The country's security agencies have ordered nearly 4,000 buildings to be inspected for suitability as shelters. The Republic's government has also allocated 5 billion zlotys.
But as for the Germans, in the event of an attack from Russia, not only are they not planning to flee anywhere, they aren't even in a hurry to go to the municipal bomb shelters. In Germany, demand for the construction of private bunkers has soared, and it's all because of the same fear of a Russian attack on NATO countries. For example, in January 2025, the number of requests for designing and building bunkers in Germany increased by half, according to Bild. A particularly large number of requests for personal bunkers from Germans came after the latest provocations by Putin. And the most popular among EU citizens today are medium-sized private bunkers with an area of 30 square meters. The cost of each is approximately 30 to 50,000 euros.
And it is the Baltic states that are preparing the most for potential Russian aggression. How is the region planning to defend itself from the possible attack? What steps have these countries already taken? All the details coming up right now.
The war in the Baltics is already underway. After the incursion of 3 Russian fighter jets, which literally flew up to the capital of Estonia, Article 4 of NATO was activated there.
We are convening consultations under Article 4. If you put together everything that has happened over the past couple of weeks, including the attack on Poland by 19 drones, this is already a systematic test of NATO. The 12-minute violation of Estonian airspace requires a decisive response, both politically and practically.
Yes, indeed, war with the Russian Federation is absolutely real. That is obvious. This is a demonstration to Europeans of their indecisiveness, and that NATO essentially is not standing up to the challenges.
Germany, Latvia, and the Czech Republic have already stated that in the case of such provocations, the planes should be shot down.
They are testing our resilience, our determination to defend ourselves. I believe we must be extremely firm that if there are violations of the rules, we must respond appropriately, including by military means, in this specific case by shooting down the planes. And only then will Russia very quickly realize that it made a mistake.
But any real action against Russia is still a long way off. For example, US President Trump has been avoiding this topic for several days now.
I won't say anything about this yet, but I will be briefed soon, and I'll let you know today or tomorrow. I don't like it when things like this happen. This could cause big problems.
Now we are clearly approaching the obvious and undeniable consequences of the United States' persistent reluctance to, in essence, fully fulfill its own fundamental obligations within the broader framework of ensuring comprehensive European security. And Europe has no other options. They have nowhere to buy weapons. The military-industrial complex is not scaled. But there is no army. Everyone is ready to trade beautifully and live richly. But to be honest, in Europe, they've gotten out of the habit of defending their interests with weapons in hand.
Moreover, information has appeared in the press that the US wants to completely abandon the defense of the Baltic states altogether.
Because, well, when just the other day information came out that the US is refusing to provide air defense systems to the Baltic countries and will likely withdraw troops over time and is already reducing military aid, this is exactly the opposite of what European countries expect from the United States in the face of such acts of aggression from Russia.
For the 4th year now, Russia has been staging provocations in the Baltics. For example, it is actively using an illegal shadow fleet there to transport oil. Estonia detained one of these tankers that lacked proper documentation. However, after an inspection, the ship was later released.
We will all monitor and inspect Russian fleet ships if anything suspicious arises. And Russia is getting nervous about this. This is an illegal way for Russia to make money for the war in Ukraine and to conduct hybrid operations against European NATO countries.
Right now, for Putin, and this is important, there is no guarantee that he is actually planning a military operation against EU and NATO countries. In other words, simply put, Putin wants to get what he needs without going to war. But simply by escalating military threats around European countries and demonstrating their weakness and inability to even defend themselves.
In addition, the Russians have repeatedly disabled communication cables between European countries in the Baltic Sea. Because of this, another tanker was detained off the coast of Finland. This time, the crew is facing criminal charges.
I believe the conclusion we can draw is that it's time to get used to a new reality. A lot of similar things could happen in the future. Of course, when something like this happened last year, the ship left the Baltic Sea, but this year we have already detained it.
Tolerating incidents like this, of course, is just giving Putin a pass to keep doing it and even escalate the corresponding threats. In other words, Putin's impunity will only motivate him even more to go further. You see this increase in the level? Escalation both towards Ukraine and towards the European Union and the countries of
NATO. As long as NATO countries hesitate, this clearly gives Putin free rein and makes it clear that he can act with impunity, doing anything from minor provocations to a direct invasion of the Baltic states.
What do you think about the latest events unfolding around Moldova? Share your opinion in the comments, like the video, and stay informed about the main headlines. More to come.